Craig Wright trial, whatever, day 6, and let's move on to the Genesis block.
OK Social. Knitter. Logo. Norbert. @bidnorbert. I live tweeted Hodlonaut versus Wright and I'll report from Copa versus Wright. Lane tips. Norbert at wallet of Satoshi.com. Norway. Joined March 2019. Tweets. 3,669. Following. 325. Followers. 7,063. Likes. 7,297. Tweets. Tweets and replies. Media. Search. Load newest. Norbert. @bidnorbert. 2H. Back for the final session of the day. Copa Dorsey lawyer says moving on to the Genesis block in the early stages. Block 1 was mined. Craig Wright says yes, technically the system had to be restarted. Copa Dorsey lawyer says lots of problems. Patch Tuesday was horrible. Shows blog post from April 2019. Quotes. I started with a miscalculation. Something about licenses. Your story is that the Genesis block is mined and then MS. Regular security updates called Patch Tuesday causes the machine to crash. And you address it by building a domain. Craig Wright says I had a domain, but I needed to integrate the systems. I wasn't doing like normal home users do in downloading updates from the internet. I had patch consolidation. When you're running, the patches don't necessarily run on a Tuesday. Copa Dorsey lawyer says in the course of the interview and blog you refer to problems causing shutdown on. You describe the cause of the problem as being Microsoft Patch Tuesday. Craig Wright says yes, that's what the industry refers to. But when you're running a WSUS server, it's the local patch server. My server does it on my schedule. It's called Patch Tuesday even when it happens on a Friday. Copa Dorsey lawyer says Patch Tuesday took place on. Craig Wright says WSUS does it on my schedule. Norbert. @bidnorbert. 2H. We're taking 5 minutes. We're all smiling incredulously at each other. Norbert. @bidnorbert. 2H. Copa Dorsey lawyer says you were telling the court in Kleiman a lie. Craig Wright says no, I was not. Copa Dorsey lawyer says so who was the member of government? Craig Wright says my uncle for a start, but other people as well. Copa Dorsey lawyer says so you are saying your uncle could be part of the government. Craig Wright says he worked in America under the US military. Copa Dorsey lawyer says but in 2019 he wasn't. Craig Wright says he still hoped he could work out a deal. Copa Dorsey lawyer says your account has been chaotic and confused because you were tried to. Craig Wright says actually the opposite, I was trying to distance myself. I was being incredibly difficult because I didn't want to answer the judge, I was under threat of contempt. Norbert. @bidnorbert. 3H. Craig Wright says I had typed the message, not the email, I had instructed the others to. I was an executive at the time. Copa Dorsey lawyer says how were you going to make Kleiman proud of his son by telling him Gareth Williams etc. were involved? Craig Wright says. Copa Dorsey lawyer says your version just keeps changing. Craig Wright says not at all. You asked what I said under oath and what I told the father of my friend to make him feel proud of his son. David died and I was happy for him to take some of my credit. Copa Dorsey lawyer says when asked about the email, you appeared to endorse. Craig Wright says not really. Craig Wright says I was under oath to tell the whole story, which I didn't want to do. I had to say this, explain how Dave wasn't actually part of development. Copa Dorsey lawyer says about national security of US government, that couldn't possibly be a reference to Gareth Williams. Craig Wright says no, but I was being difficult at the time, was trying to waffle as much as possible. Norbert. @bidnorbert. 3H. Copa Dorsey lawyer says. Craig Wright says I wanted to contact Dave's father and make him proud of his son. Copa Dorsey lawyer says it was much later. Craig Wright says it took me that long to find him. Copa Dorsey lawyer says you were asked who the third person was. Objection based on U.S. national security. You answered you didn't know. You were asked if the third person was a member of the U.S. government. You said you don't know. Judge ruled you should answer questions on this subject. You were asked if you typed that. You said no. Directly opposite of what you said earlier. Craig Wright says no. I typed it, but I did not type the email. Copa Dorsey lawyer says you said it was probably written by. You said she got instruction to write those words from Win-Win or others. Craig Wright says, Norbert. @BidNorbert. Free H. Copa Dorsey lawyer says in your first witness statement you described giving him a single copy. Craig Wright says I said I shared one, not that it was the only one. Copa Dorsey lawyer says you didn't say. Craig Wright says I didn't know I had to. Copa Dorsey lawyer says you've come up with the story of multiple versions to try to paper over differences. Craig Wright says no, he's talked about it multiple times. I said he dropped it in the bin. Copa Dorsey lawyer says you said you handed him a hard copy because it would fit with the story about coffee stains. Craig Wright says no actually. Stefan often binned hard copies, so I gave him a USB stick. Norbert. @BidNorbert. Free H. Copa Dorsey lawyer says you say you shared WP with Matthews. N-Chain CEO and supporter. Craig Wright says number. Copa Dorsey lawyer says you wouldn't say he was instrumental for you in 2015-16. Craig Wright says I would say that's a lie. It happened because I wanted to do research, got doxed. Copa Dorsey lawyer says Matthews in 2005 was CEO of Centrebit, you met there. That's your story, isn't it? Craig Wright says yes, I actually did it multiple times. Just walk into offices and start talking with. Copa Dorsey lawyer says he was handed a USB stick containing a paper. He printed it and read it later. He says he identified it as a draft of the Bitcoin WP. He's quite specific. Craig Wright says yes, that would be the Timecoin paper. That's why he only became aware of Bitcoin later. Copa Dorsey lawyer says okay, so the Timecoin paper in soft copy, and Bitcoin WP is hard copy. Craig Wright says multiple versions, I describe it terribly. Norbert. @BidNorbert. Free H. Copa Dorsey lawyer says you have never been able to show a single email that you shared the WP with anything. Craig Wright says they've been lost. Copa Dorsey lawyer says and no soft or hard copies of what was shared. Craig Wright says no, that's actually incorrect, you have multiple hard copies. Copa Dorsey lawyer says which? Craig Wright says. Copa Dorsey lawyer says not only don't you have these emails or copies, none of the 21 people have come forward with their emails or copies. Craig Wright says no, it's been over 15 years. A lot of people don't have 15-year-old emails. Copa Dorsey lawyer says you're very unfortunate that not one of the 21 have come forward. Craig Wright says no, actually, they can talk about all of the systems they've seen etc. Copa Dorsey lawyer says trying the question again, none of them have come forward. Craig Wright says no, and if they did, you'd say that it's just made up. Norbert. @BidNorbert. Free H. Copa Dorsey lawyer says back to your list of names. You sent them Bitcoin WP. Craig Wright says or Timecoin, many versions Edward Archer. Copa Dorsey lawyer says are you sure he was called Edward? Craig Wright says, Edwin Archer. Oh, you can laugh. Copa Dorsey lawyer says you could have learned from the press that Gareth William died. You plucked his name out of the air as a mysterious collaborator. You told the court Williams was in a video conference with you in 2011. Craig Wright says yes, I got that date wrong. Copa Dorsey lawyer says you described him as former MI6 GCHQ. You say you trained him partially as a UK agent. Craig Wright says I met him at Black Hat conferences. Copa Dorsey lawyer says you say you involved because you wanted to clean up Satoshi. Craig Wright says yes. Copa Dorsey lawyer says that dates the call to 2011 when Satoshi left the scene. Craig Wright says I get dates wrong. Copa Dorsey lawyer says you describe a vivid recollection. Craig Wright says no, I did not. I had a call. I was very, very angry. Trying not to respond, it was difficult. Norbert. @BidNorbert.